Revit 2026 is here, and it's packed with some insane new features. All right, Revit users, listen up. You're going to want to stick around for this one because Revit 2026 is bringing some seriously cool updates. Wall settings improved, sheets upgraded, Toposolid got some love too. And that's just the start. If you want to stay ahead and make the most of these new tools, follow along as we break down the best changes. Some of these will make your workflow way smoother. First up, a long overdue fix for wall joins. Number 1, allow compound structure without core layers. In previous versions of Revit, every compound structure had to have a core layer, whether you wanted one or not. The core layer acted as the strongest part of the wall, breaking through other layers and joining with the cores of adjacent walls. Sounds good in theory, right? Well, in practice, this could be a real headache when managing wall joins. For example, let's say you're adding a tiled wall inside a bathroom as a separate wall. Since every wall needed a core layer, you had no choice but to mark the single tile layer as the core. The result? The tile layer would break through surrounding wall layers, trying to reach their core layers, and suddenly, you've got messy wall joins and alignment issues. How Revit 2026 fixes this? Now you can simply delete the core layers entirely. No more forced core layers causing unnecessary conflicts. Going back to our bathroom example, you can now make a wall with just a single tile layer, and it will stay put without interfering with the surrounding walls. No unnecessary layer breaks, no messy joins, just a clean, predictable result. It's a simple change, but one that finally gives us the flexibility we've been missing. And that's just the beginning. Up next, let's talk about another much-needed improvement to wall joins. Number 2, customize layer priority in a compound structure. Now that we can finally remove core layers, let's talk about another huge improvement in how walls, floors, and ceilings interact. The ability to customize layer priority in a compound structure. What's new? In previous versions of Revit, layer priority was locked based on its function. The structure layer was always priority 1 and finish layers were priority 5. This meant structure layers always broke through other layers in wall joins no matter what. Sounds logical, right? But in reality, it could lead to some frustrating wall joint issues. Sometimes finish layers needed to cut through a structure layer, but Revit just wouldn't allow it. This often resulted in layers getting overridden in ways that didn't match real-world construction. How Revit 2026 fixes this. Now, Autodesk has added a new column right next to the function column, allowing us to manually set priority numbers for each layer. This means we are no longer stuck with the default hierarchy. We can now decide which layers should take priority in wall joins. If a finish layer needs to break through a structure layer, we can simply adjust the priority number and make it happen. This gives way more control over how walls connect and display. No more weird layer break issues, no more unnecessary compromises, just the flexibility to set up your compound structures the way they should be. If you're finding this video helpful, check out RevitGamers.com. Our courses go beyond the basics, bringing Revit to life with hundreds of dynamic visuals and animations that make complex concepts feel easy. This unique training approach is designed to speed up your learning and make BEAM adoption smoother than ever. Every day, more students and companies are joining Revit Gamers Club to elevate their Revit skills. Don't miss out! Head to RevitGamers.com and see how Revit training can be fun, visual, and incredibly effective. Number 3, create walls by room or by segment. So far, we've seen more flexibility in compound structures, but what about adding new walls quickly without all the extra setup? That's where the Create Walls by Room or by Segment tool comes in. What's new? Let's consider this bathroom. Say you've placed a room inside and want to add a wall on one side. Now, Revit 2026 makes this process way faster with 2 new placement options. Place by segment. This lets you quickly create a parallel wall along a selected wall segment. Place by room. This places a parallel wall along all room-bounding walls in one click. How it works: 1. Go to the Architecture tab and select Wall. 2. Choose the wall type. 3. Use Place by Segment to select a specific wall. Revit will instantly place a parallel wall along it. This tool is so similar to the Pickline tool in the Drawing Tools set. If you want to apply it to an entire room, 1. Use Place by Room, and it will create parallel walls around the whole space. 2. But wait, by default, these new walls will cover up doors and windows. Here's the smart fix. Enable Auto Join and Lock. This automatically cuts openings for doors and windows and keeps the new wall locked to the existing one. So if the main wall moves, the parallel one follows. This feature makes it way easier to experiment with interior finishes without messing with your primary walls. Number 4, Toposolid Subdivision Enhancement. Alright, let's switch gears and talk about Toposolids, because Revit 2026 just made them a lot more powerful. What's new? Before, when subdividing a Toposolid, you could only raise parts of it using a positive offset. If you needed to cut into the terrain, tough luck. But now, negative offsets are finally a thing. How it works: when creating a new subdivision in a Toposolid, a positive offset raises the subdivision above the existing terrain. A negative offset pushes it below the surface, excavating the Toposolid. And here's the best part: Revit now tracks the excavation volume right in the subdivision's instance properties. No more manual calculations, just check the property panel and it's all there. This is a game changer for site design, allowing for faster and more accurate terrain modifications. Now, let's move on to the next great addition. Number 5, Copy-Paste Shape Editing. Revit 2026 just made shape editing way more efficient. What's new? In previous versions, if you spent time carefully editing points and lines to shape a floor, roof, or Toposolid, you had to manually recreate that work every time on another element. But now, you can finally copy and paste shape edits between elements. How it works: 1. While in edit mode, select points or lines from your shape-edited element. 2. Use the copy command from the ribbon, or just hit Ctrl+C. 3. Switch to another element in shape edit mode and paste. Ctrl+V. This works for floors, roofs, and Toposolids, making it much faster to reuse complex edits across different elements. No more redoing the same modifications over and over. Now, let's check out the next new feature. Number 6, show imported CAD files in the Manage Links dialog. Alright, let's talk about something that's going to make model management a whole lot easier, especially if you're working with CAD files. In earlier versions of Revit, the Manage Links dialog wasn't very helpful when it came to figuring out which CAD files were linked and which were imported. You had to hunt around and guess, which wasn't ideal, especially when trying to clean up or optimize your model. But now, in Revit 2026, that's finally changed. The Manage Links dialog has been updated and moved to the left-hand side of the Insert tab. And now, in the Reference Type column, you can clearly see which files are linked and which are imported. Simple, clear, and way more helpful. And just as a friendly reminder, importing DWG files is rarely a good idea. It might seem convenient, but it almost always leads to performance issues and bloated models. Link your files whenever you can. This update doesn't just make things clearer, it helps keep your projects healthier. Let's move on to the next new feature. Number 7, Title Block Scale Override. Here's one that'll make sheet setup just a little less frustrating, especially for anyone who's tired of seeing as indicated pop up on their title blocks. In earlier versions of Revit, if you had multiple views on a sheet with different scales, the title block would just show as indicated by default. There was no way to control that or override it with something more meaningful. But in Revit 2026, we finally have a workaround. There's now a new title block type parameter called Scale Override, multiple values. This lets you replace as indicated with any custom text you want. Just note that this parameter is text only, so you can't input a real numeric scale like 1 to 100. It's a small feature, but if you're managing presentation sheets or working across different view scales, it adds a nice layer of flexibility and control. Let's keep going. More great updates ahead. Number 8, View to Sheet Positioning and Automated Placement. Now this next one is a huge win for anyone who's ever struggled to align floor plans, sections, or elevations consistently across multiple sheets. In earlier versions of Revit, getting views to land in exactly the same spot on different sheets was, let's just say, not fun. You either had to rely on guide grids, reference planes, or just eyeball it, which often meant something was slightly off, no matter how careful you were. But Revit 2026 just made that process a whole lot easier. There's a new positioning and view panel in the viewport settings on the Modify tab. Here's how it works. Start by placing one of your floor plans onto a sheet. Once it's in the right spot, click Save Position and give that position a name. Now go to another sheet, drop in another floor plan or any other view, and select the viewport. From the Saved Position drop-down, just select the position you saved earlier. And that's it! The new view will snap right into place, aligned with the previous one. And once it's positioned, you can't accidentally move it, so alignment stays perfect. You can use this feature with floor plans, sections, elevations, callouts, pretty much any view. Now here's the big question. How does Revit know where to align from? By default, it aligns based on either the view's origin, the center of the crop region, or any of the corners. But you're not stuck with the default. Just select the viewport and click Edit Position. Revit will show all the available anchor points. Click to choose the one you want, or use the View Anchor tool to manually pick a point inside the view. When you're done, click OK. And now your views will align based on the anchor you selected. Want to reset or change a view's position? Just go back to the drop-down, choose None to remove it, or select a different saved position. And if you ever want to rename or delete a saved position, just use the Manage Position option. This one's going to save a ton of time and give your documentation a much more professional edge. Let's move on. Number 9. New parameters and categories in Sheet List. Now let's talk about something that's going to make your sheet schedules way more informative and flexible, because Revit 2026 just added a few long-awaited parameters to the sheet list. We now have access to scale, sheet width, and sheet height directly in sheet schedules. That means you can finally track and organize sheets by these values without having to manually enter them somewhere else. It's a small change, but for anyone managing large drawing sets, especially with varied sizes and scales, it's a very welcome one. But that's not all. Revit 2026 also brings in the title block category as part of the project parameter system. This means you can now create custom parameters specifically for title blocks. And more importantly, you can now include title block parameters directly in your sheet list schedules. This gives you a new level of control when documenting, sorting, or tagging sheets based on title block info, something that just wasn't possible before. It's another step toward better documentation and smarter project organization. Let's jump to the next update. Number 10, Accelerated Graphics Tech Preview. All right, now let's talk about something a bit more experimental, the Accelerated Graphics Tech Preview. This feature aims to boost performance in both 2D and 3D views while improving the overall visual quality. Autodesk is basically working on a new graphics engine behind the scenes, one that's supposed to make Revit smoother, faster, and more visually polished by taking better advantage of modern hardware. Sounds great, right? Well, it's a tech preview, and that's important to keep in mind. In theory, this should give us more responsive navigation and cleaner graphics. But in practice, at least on my end, the results haven't been amazing just yet. Some elements look wireframed or glitched, and the overall display doesn't feel quite production-ready. It might be related to hardware compatibility, possibly GPU or CPU related, or it could just be that Autodesk is still ironing things out. The good news is this preview is optional, so if it doesn't give you the visual upgrade you're expecting, you can always switch it off and wait for future improvements. It's definitely exciting to see Revit moving toward a modern graphics system, but for now, maybe test this out on a copy of your model rather than your main project. Let's keep going. There's still more in Revit 2026 worth checking out. Number 11, View Reference Enhancements. Here's one for anyone deep into documentation. View Reference Enhancements in Revit 2026. First up, view reference labels are now instance-based. In the past, when you placed a view reference, say a section or callout, it pulled its label from the type, which meant every instance had to match. That made it harder to align with specific documentation standards or make quick edits across views. Now that label is instance-based, which gives you much more flexibility. You can place a view reference and then directly change the label in the Properties palette using the Reference Label field. If you still want a default, you can set that using the type parameter called Default Reference Label. It's simple, and it makes referencing views much more intuitive. Let's move on to the next new feature. Number 12, Options Bar Relocation. All right, let's finish off with a change that might not seem huge at first, but actually reflects something bigger about the direction Revit is heading. If you've been using Revit for a while, you're probably familiar with the Options Bar, that little strip under the ribbon that's been around forever. It's where a lot of controls use to quietly sit, depending on the tool you are using. Now in Revit 2026, Autodesk has continued moving many of those Options Bar controls directly into the ribbon or the Properties palette, which is a pretty clear sign that they're phasing out the options bar altogether. So, what does this mean? Well, whether you're tagging elements, adjusting wall joints, placing dimensions, or using basic modified tools like copy, move, or rotate, you'll now find the relevant settings right where you'd expect them, in the Contextual Ribbon tab. It's a lot more visible, and it saves you from constantly looking up and down between different UI areas. Even dimension tools have had their options spread out more logically between the ribbon and the Properties palette, depending on the context. The bottom line is, this change might take a bit of getting used to at first, but overall it makes Revit feel cleaner, more modern, and a little more intuitive. And that's a good note to end on. That's it for our look at some of the most exciting new features in Revit 2026. If you found this helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future updates. And let me know in the comments, which feature did you find the most useful, or are you happy with this year's feature set overall? I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.